On the 13th of December 1973, Edward Heath stood up and told Britain that from New Year's Day, the country would run on commercial electricity 3 days a week only. The coal miners were on strike. The oil embargo had cut supply. The government had run out of options. It lasted until March. Across Britain, families lived through cuts that could run for hours without warning, sometimes from tea time until after midnight. They coped, not because they had emergency equipment, because their mothers had shown them things that still worked. Number 3 on this list is the cooking trick the Ministry of Food put into 2 World Wars newspapers and Britain then quietly forgot. Number 8 still makes me slightly embarrassed that we let it go. Subscribe and let's count down 20 forgotten tricks every British family used when the government cut the lights. Number 20. The dripping candle. Every kitchen in Britain before the 1960s kept a jar near the cooker. Not honey, not jam. Dripping. The rendered fat from a Sunday joint collected through the week in the same earthenware pot, bacon grease and all. It was kept for cooking, for spreading on bread when money was tight, and when it needed to, for light. A wide-mouthed jar of lard with a cotton wick pushed down through the centre with a pencil. 40 hours from 1 can of lard, burning steady as a candle and smelling, if you want to know, slightly of last Sunday's roast. The jar sat flat. It couldn't tip. It didn't need a holder. And when the power went off at 9 o'clock without warning, as it did repeatedly through January and February of 1974, this was the first thing a sensible household reached for. Candles sold out within hours of each announcement. The households that managed light best weren't the ones who'd bought them. They were the ones who still kept the jar. Number 19. The bath. My mother filled the bath the moment she heard anything uncertain on the news. Didn't wait to see if it would happen. The radio said something vague about the miners, and she was already in the bathroom turning the taps while I stood in the doorway asking why. Because it's there, she said. She had this way of explaining things that ended the question entirely. 80 gallons in a full bath. 4 days of drinking water for a family, or weeks of flushing if you were careful. When the electricity failed, the water kept flowing for hours. The families who knew this filled everything the moment the announcement came. The bath first, then every pot, every jug in the larder, every empty milk bottle on the doorstep. The trick wasn't equipment, it was timing. And timing, as my mother understood it, cost absolutely nothing. Number 18. Frozen milk bottles. They filled every gap with the old glass pint bottles, filled them with water and let them freeze solid overnight. Those blocks of ice became thermal mass, a cold battery. When the power cut came, the ice held the temperature down for 48 hours or more, so long as you kept the door shut. And when the ice finally melted, you had clean drinking water at exactly the moment you needed it. 1 idea, 2 jobs, no cost. A refrigerator battery backup unit costs around £300 and dies in 10 hours. A woman in Sheffield in 1965 was outperforming that with old milk bottles and tap water. Number 17. The penny in the cup. This one costs a penny and it answers a question no gadget has ever improved upon. You come home after 3 days away. The lights are back on, the freezer hums. Everything inside looks solid. But did it thaw and refreeze while you were gone? Because refrozen mince can put your family in hospital, and it looks exactly like mince that was never defrosted. The old trick, a cup of frozen water in the freezer with a coin resting on the ice. Penny, shilling, whatever you had. If the coin is still sitting on top when you return, nothing melted. You're safe. If it's sunk to the bottom, everything thawed completely. If it's somewhere in the middle, things softened but probably stayed cold enough. Today you can buy a Wi-Fi freezer alarm for £60. It is completely useless when the Wi-Fi is down. During a power cut, it is. The coin doesn't need a network. The coin just tells the truth. Number 16. Shop solar lights. Solar path lights, the kind sold in bundles from pound shops and garden centres, charge themselves every day for free. When the grid fails, you go outside at dusk, pull the stakes from the ground and bring them in. Stand each one in a jar or upright in a cup of dried rice and you have a steady amber glow in every room. In the morning, put them back on the windowsill or the front step to charge. Repeat as long as the cut lasts. 10 lights cost around £10. They never need batteries replaced. They never need a wall socket. They recharge from whatever the sky offers. Every trick on this list won because it didn't need a bill, a plug, or a postman. The women who invented these things didn't call it preparedness. They called it getting on. Number 15. The car battery. People spend £2,000 on portable power stations when there's an electricity generator sitting on their driveway. A £20 inverter in the cigarette socket turns your car into a charging hub for phones, torches, and radios. 20 minutes of engine outside, never in the garage, and everything in the house keeps running on the petrol already in the tank. Keep the tank above half as a matter of habit. It costs nothing to maintain, and it's worth more than anything in a catalogue. Stick with me to number 3, because the cooking trick the Ministry of Food printed in wartime newspapers is something I genuinely wasn't expecting to feel as much about as I do. Number 14. The one warm room. Do not try to heat the house. Shrink it. This is how British families had survived winter for centuries before central heating arrived in the 60s and 70s. The parlour was shut in November. The front room, the good room, the one with the 3-piece suite and the dog-eared Radio Times on the side table, was closed until Christmas. We lived in the kitchen where the Rayburn or the back boiler kept things bearable. The rest of the house was cold. Deprivation. That was just how winter worked. In a back-to-back in Halifax, and I grew up in one, so I can speak to this more precisely than I might like, the kitchen in January was where everyone was. Not because of any emergency plan, because it was warm and the front room wasn't. During the 3-day week, the families who still remembered this rhythm managed best. One small room, blankets over the doorway, rolled towels against the windowsills. 4 people in a sealed kitchen put out roughly the warmth of 400-watt bulbs between them. Add 2 candles and the temperature comes up faster than you'd think. A whole house generator costs £10,000 to £15,000 installed. A closed door and a stack of blankets has never cost a penny. Number 13. The breeze block stove. 4 breeze blocks, stacked right, one turned on its end to form a small tunnel at the bottom. And you have a rocket stove. The chimney effect pulls air through the tunnel with such force that a handful of sticks, the kind you rake off the lawn and throw away, Sam, will boil a full pot in minutes. No charcoal, no propane, no fuel to stockpile. British allotment holders and smallholders have improvised stoves from stacked stone for generations. Set the blocks on flagstones or bare concrete, well away from anything that burns. The physics are free. The camping industry just found a way to charge for them. Number 12. The torch and bottle. A torch is a poor room light. One harsh beam and everyone squinting across the table. Your grandmother's oil lamp lit the whole kitchen because it glowed outward in every direction. You can get the same effect from a 2-litre water bottle. Fill a clear plastic bottle with water, strap a head torch around it with the lens aimed inward into the water. The water diffuses the beam into a wide, even glow. Bright enough to eat by, play cards, see each other without blinding anyone. One set of batteries illuminates the whole room. Number 11. Bubble wrap on windows. Windows are where heat leaves. A single pane of old British glass loses warmth 10 times faster than an insulated wall. In a January power cut, every degree retained is a degree you don't have to produce. Greenhouse growers have known for decades that ordinary packing bubble wrap halves heat loss through glass. You spray the window with water, press the bubble side against the wet pane, and it clings by surface tension. No tape, no adhesive. Peels off clean in spring, and daylight still comes through. Softer, but enough. A roll of wrap costs a few pounds, or nothing if you save it from deliveries. The 1970s version was newspaper stuffed into window frames and rolled towels against the sills. Trapped air is insulation. A newspaper was free. Every trick on this list survives the same way. It relies on something that doesn't run out. Sunlight, gravity, body heat, insulation, habit. They didn't call this survival. They called it just getting on. If you're finding this useful, we have a lot more where this came from. Please do subscribe. It genuinely helps. Number 10. The stone hot water bottle. Before electric blankets, nobody in Britain heated bedrooms. They heated beds. Victorian families warmed flat stones or earthenware bricks beside the kitchen fire, wrapped them in flannel and put them at the foot of the bed an hour before sleep. The stone held and released heat slowly through the night. A cold room stopped mattering because the bed was warm. The habit lasted longer than most people remember. Working in West Yorkshire kept stone bottles in use well into the 50s because stone was free and rubber cost money. A family with an electric blanket and a power cut had a cold bed. A family that remembered the old stone trick was sleeping warm. The modern free version, a long cotton sock, the one whose pair went years ago. Fill it with dry rice, tie it off, heated on any warm surface you have going. It holds warmth for over an hour, molds around cold feet, and doubles as a heat pack for aching hands and knees. Cost: one orphaned sock and a cup of Tilda basmati that's been in the back of the cupboard since 2019. Number 9. The larder, and in the larder was always the same stock. Heinz baked beans, Crossy and Blackwell tinned tomato soup, sardines in oil, corned beef, condensed milk, a jar of Bovril, a tin of Lyle's golden syrup, cream crackers, a pot of Hartley's jam, everything edible cold from the tin with a spoon, no cooker, no water, no preparation. The rule was simple, and it was passed between women in kitchens rather than written down anywhere. Buy one extra when you buy one, eat the oldest first, replace what you use. Nothing expires, nothing is wasted. The whole system costs nothing beyond the ordinary weekly shop. And the 40p tool that makes it all work in a power cut, a manual tin opener. Because not one gadget in your kitchen drawer can open a tin in the dark without a battery. Number 8. The Tilley lamp. Smell of the 1970s, the actual smell, the one I can bring back if I'm quiet for a moment. Part of it is paraffin, not petrol. Not the SO blue from the van. Paraffin, the quiet, slightly sweet, slightly sharp smell of a Tilley lamp warming up on the kitchen windowsill. My father had one. He'd had it since before I was born. A brass pressure lamp, battered and refilled more times than either of us ever counted. It sat on that windowsill for years without being needed. Then in the winter of 1974, he needed it. You pump the small reservoir by hand to pressurize the fuel, touch a match to the mantle, and the Tilley produces a bright, clean, steady, white light. Bright enough to read by, sew by, do homework by. 1 pint of paraffin runs it for 12 hours. Tilley lamps are still. Paraffin is still sold. A new one costs around £40. Boot sale £2 to £5 for old ones, and they outlast everything. The modern rechargeable LED lantern costs £180. It runs for 12-hour socket. My father's Tilley ran for 12 hours and then needed a tin of paraffin he'd bought at the ironmonger's for pennies. There is a reason Tilley has been making these since 1818. Some things simply work. Number 7. The buddy burner. Empty sardine tin. The flat oval ones with the pull ring tops that always broke before you got them fully open. Cut strips of corrugated cardboard the same height as the tin. Coil them tight inside it. Pour melted wax over the cardboard. Old candle stubs, birthday candle ends, broken crayons from the children's tin. Let it cool. That is a buddy burner. Burns hot and steady for over an hour. Set it under an upturned bean tin. Holes punched around the bottom rim with a nail, a small flap cut in the side to reach the flame, and the flat end of the tin becomes a cooking surface hot enough to fry eggs, heat soup, boil a small pan of water. Total cost, the things you are going to throw away. Before we get to number 1, which isn't a trick at all but I think is the most important thing on this list, number 3 is going to tell you what a government does when it knows people are in trouble and doesn't have a clever answer. Number 6. The BBC transistor radio. When the power died in 1974, so did the television. In many areas, the transmitter went dark with everything else. The telephone exchange ran on its own supply, but calls were unreliable. The most important in millions of British homes on those evenings was a small transistor radio on the kitchen windowsill. BBC Radio 4, what older listeners still called the home service, maintained emergency power and kept broadcasting through the cuts. Weather, news, updates on when supply might return, advice from local councils. Families gathered around transistor radios the way they'd gathered around them during the war. Not because they'd planned to, but because it was the one thing still on. Charity shops sell transistor radios for £2 to £5. Modern households own Alexa speakers and no radio at all. What strikes me working through this list is the same thing every time. These tricks weren't invented by anyone called a survivalist. They weren't developed by anyone preparing for anything. They were worked out by women, mostly women, running households in Yorkshire pit villages and Midlands terraces and Welsh mining towns, who treated difficulty as something that happened on a Tuesday and required a practical response, not a philosophical one. The 3-day week didn't create this knowledge. It briefly removed the comfort that had allowed some of us to forget it. In homes where someone's mother or grandmother had insisted on keeping the old ways, the Tilley lamp, the stocked larder, the knowledge of how to cook on a tin stove. Those families were fine. The ones who'd let that knowledge go entirely sat in the dark and waited. Number 5. The biscuit tin of cash. When the power goes, card readers die. ATMs die. Contactless payment in the country dies within the hour. The economy reverts almost immediately to the way Britain ran in 1955, and in 1955, cash was the only option. During the 3-day week, shops that stayed open went cash only the moment the cuts started. The families who could buy paraffin, bread, and gas cylinders were the ones who had paper money. The families who'd put everything on a bank card found themselves unable to buy anything at all. The old habit was a tin, a Huntley and Palmer's biscuit tin, or a Quality Street tin, or an envelope tucked into the pages of a book somewhere in the bedroom. 40 or 50 pounds in small notes, fivers, pound notes, a few coins for the meter. Nothing spent unless it absolutely had to be. The families who'd kept that habit into 1974 were better placed than the ones who hadn't. 50 pounds in fives and ones, somewhere only you know. It sits there doing nothing for years. Then one January, it's the most powerful thing you own. Number 4. The cold bedroom. Before central heating became standard in British homes, which didn't happen until the 70s and for many households considerably later, nobody in Britain heated bedrooms. Quilts were stacked, blankets were heavy. You wore a vest on pajamas and you didn't argue about it. The curtains were thick, the window was shut, the door was closed. You got into bed, you warmed the bed with your own body, and the room could do whatever it liked. Close the bedroom door, stack the quilts, put a warm stone at the foot of the bed before you sleep. The rest is physics, and physics hasn't had a price rise since the universe started. Number 3. The haybox. This is the one I keep coming back to. In the autumn of 1917, the Ministry of Food faced a fuel shortage. Coal was going to the war effort. Domestic supply was tight, and the ministry's answer, published in newspapers, printed on leaflets, handed out by the Women's Institute and the Cooperative Society, was the haybox. The principle is simple. Fuel is only needed to bring food to heat, not to keep it there. You bring a pot, porridge, stew, soup, lentils, whatever you have, to a full rolling boil for 10 minutes. Lid on tight. Then you take it off the flame entirely and lower it into a box packed with whatever insulation you have. Blankets, old coats, rolled newspapers. Hay, originally, which it comes from. Seal the box. Walk away. Come back in 2 to 4 hours. The food is using only the heat already in the water, still hot. Fully done. No additional fuel. The ministry promoted it again in the Second World War. Patriotic fuel-saving cookery, the pamphlets called it. Housewives were actively encouraged to build permanent hayboxes, insulated wooden chests lined with newspaper for everyday use. It cuts fuel consumption by as much as 80%. Today, a company sells an insulated cooking bag called a Wonder Oven for £150. What gets me, and I'm aware this is a strange thing to feel about a cooking method, is that 2 governments told everyone this worked. They put it in out leaflets. Within a generation, we'd forgotten it so completely that someone could rename it, put it in a different bag, and sell it back to us for £150. The government told us. And Six doesn't check what you pay. The pot cooks regardless. First time you try it is uncertain. The most powerful preparation available costs nothing but 1 evening. Choose a night. Turn off the main breaker. Then live by your own advice. Find the torches. Discover which kitchen drawers you can't locate in the dark. Light the dripping candle. Put the milk bottle on the windowsill and see how much light a head torch through water actually throws. Try the buddy burner in the back garden. Lower the pot into the haybox and see how strange it feels to truss blankets with your dinner. Put a warm stone at the foot of the bed. Under pressure, people don't rise to the occasion. They fall to the level of their preparation. That was true in 1917. That was true in 1917, in 1940, in 1974. It is still true now. A single evening turns panic into routine, and routine in the dark is everything. Number 1. The street. The strongest predictor of which households came through the 3-day week, and through the Blitz before it, and the floods of 1953 and the winter of 1947, wasn't equipment. It wasn't income. It was whether people knew 3 names on their street. Not a list of emergency contacts. 3 names. People they'd actually spoken to. People who knew them. In a row of terraced houses in County Durham in the winter of 1974, one elderly woman, living alone, coal fire running low, stayed warm through 11 days of cuts because her next-door neighbour had a camping stove, and the family across the road brought soup on the third evening because they had extra, and they knew who she was. Separately, 4 cold households with incomplete supplies. Together, a system. 1 had heat, 1 had a way to cook, 1 had food, 1 had the sense to look in. They didn't call it a network, they called it a street. Your great-grandparents didn't call this preparedness. They called it being a decent neighbour, and it was the only insurance most working families in Britain ever had. Learn 3 names on your street before the week is out. When the lights go out, you won't be a household in the dark. You'll be part of something that has kept people warm and fed since there were streets to live on. Here's my challenge. Do 1 thing from this list this week. 1. Put a penny on a cup of ice. Fill a milk bottle for the freezer. Or knock on the door of someone 2 houses down whose name you don't actually know. Then tell me in the comments what you tried. I want to know if the haybox gets more love than the dripping candle. Because the people who came through the hard years didn't do it with equipment. They did it with knowledge and with each other.